Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in today to talk about supplementary aids and services. I'm glad you came to learn with me. I am Stephanie Nicholls, the training manager for Michigan Alliance for Families. This is one video in a series of videos on the big parts of the IEP. So in addition to today's supplementary aids and services video, we also have present level of academic achievement and functional performance and goals, objectives, and progress monitoring. Those three videos will give you a great picture of those big parts of the IEP and how they work together. Michigan Alliance for Families is totally free parent training and information all throughout the state of Michigan. We are your free guide to special education. We provide families with information, support, and education throughout their special education experience, and that's from when you're first questioning if your student may need an evaluation through the years of services. In Michigan, special education support services are from birth to age 26, depending on the individual student need. So if you are working with early on, transitioning out of early on, in preschool, transitioning to kindergarten, working on reading skills in 3rd grade, or trying to figure out how to navigate the school in middle school, or thinking about adult transition planning and adult services and post-secondary education, employment, all of those different transitions and periods throughout your special education journey, Michigan Alliance for Families is here to support you when we have information on all of those areas. So you can go to michiganallianceforfamilies.org to get information or call the 800 number, 800-552-4821 to connect with your regional parent mentor. But we do have lots of information on special education issues and disability-specific information as well. Just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's our big federal law. And MARSE, Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education. Those are our Michigan rules. We're going to talk about what those require for the individualized education program. And then we can dive into today's topic, supplementary aids and related services. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, is the federal civil rights law that ensures eligible children with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education, sometimes called FAPE, in the least restrictive environment. Each state has to follow IDEA and may also create additional laws and rules. In Michigan, the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education, sometimes called MARSE, outline the specifics of how special education will be implemented in Michigan. So the things in the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education can be more than what's in the IDEA, but they can't be less than that. So I think I just said that in Michigan, we provide special education supports and services from birth through 26, and at Michigan Alliance for Families, we support families through all of that time as well. The federal law, the IDEA, requires special education supports and services from age 3 to 21. So in Michigan, we've expanded that range and are providing more than what is required in the federal law. None of the states can do less. All of the states have to do that minimum in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So the IDEA says that children with disabilities are entitled to a free and appropriate public education designed to meet the child's unique needs and prepare the child for further education, employment, and independent living. So the intention is to look at the student's needs and what additional changes or special education related services are needed for the child to be prepared for adulthood and being a part of our society. The tool, the main method to provide that free and appropriate public education that is required is through developing a plan or a program that's based on the individual needs of the student. So the Individualized Education Program is a part of the federal law, the IDEA, and it needs to be reviewed every year. It needs to have goals and objectives, and progress needs to be monitored. It needs to include that present level, and it needs to include the supplementary aids and services. The Individualized Education Program is intended to take all of those things together and build a program that meets the individual child's specific needs. How are those specific needs met? What does the IEP cover? What areas are we considering when we're thinking about an individualized education program? I think we all start thinking about academics. Parents, teachers, everybody. We think about that structured curriculum, that specific learning that's supposed to take place in school, that's in class, that's ELA and math and social studies and science, and then it's your electives, all of your class periods. So we're looking at PE and music and art and computer science and health. All of that academic learning should be considered, and how the student is accessing that general education curriculum or special education modified curriculum needs to be considered in the individualized education program. Beyond that, beyond the classroom, we want to think about the whole day. So we want to think about the non-academic time. We want to think about field trips and recess and lunch and transportation. What does it look like for the student to get to the school, get in the building, get unpacked, get organized, get ready for the day? In that unstructured time between classes, do we need behavior support? Do we need visuals? Do we need, what does the student, that individual student, need during those times? That needs to be a part of their individualized education program. And then extracurricular activities through the school that are beyond the school day. And those are clubs and sports and different activities that are offered. They have to be through the school though. So sometimes other groups rent out a room in the school. Like I think the Scouts do this pretty regularly, where the Scouts meet at the school, but the Scouts are not a school-sponsored activity. They're not an extracurricular activity. They're a private activity. So your IEP isn't going to cover those private activities, but it is going to cover chess club or yearbook group. Those groups that are a part of the school, your supports and services should be available if needed based on the child's unique individual needs for full participation in that entire school experience. We talked about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We talked about the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education, and that those together lay out the requirements in Michigan for what needs to be in the individualized education program to provide a free and appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities. What does IDEA say about our topic today? Supplementary aids and services. A statement needs to be included in the IEP that describes the supplementary aids and services, and that those supplementary aids and services, those supports that are provided, should enable the child to meet their annual goals or advance appropriately toward attaining their annual goals, make progress toward their annual goals, and be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum, participate in extracurriculars, and other non-academic activities. All those environments we were talking about, all those things we're thinking about that the IEP covers, the supplementary aids and services should enable the child to be involved in and make progress in general education and participate in extracurricular and non-academic. It also should allow the student to be educated and participate with children with and without disabilities throughout the school day, throughout their educational experience. I think we now have a good understanding of the law, where this guidance is coming from, that it's part of the individualized education program, that the IDEA requires that the supplementary aids and services be described. Let's talk more about supplementary aids and services and what they are and what they look like. I mean, when you're thinking about this, it's really all about access. It's about ensuring the student's disability is not creating hurdles where the student cannot access the academic, non-academic, and extracurricular environments. Supplementary aids and services can be provided across all those environments we're talking about, all those education-related settings, so extracurricular, non-academic, and academic settings, to enable the child with disability to be educated with non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. This is all about access in the least restrictive environment. So when we're talking about supplementary aids and services, that means extra services in addition to what is already provided. So when we're thinking of the general education classroom, we want to think about what the individual student's needs are to be involved in and make progress in that general education environment. Lots of classrooms have universal supports built in. All classrooms have universal supports built in. Teachers are trying to meet the needs of their students. Sometimes that universal support might be a specific box where we turn in the homework. Sometimes it might be the schedule for the day or the agenda for the class period on the board. You want to make sure you're talking to your students' current teachers and talking about what works well for your student. Because your second grade teacher puts the schedule for the day on the board does not mean that the third grade teacher is going to put the schedule for the day on the board. So if that is something that is an important support for your student where they need to know what is coming next and what to expect, we want to document that in the individualized education program, even if it's in place currently, because it's an extra support that's needed as we change environments. So maybe the general education teacher puts the schedule for the class period on the board, and the electives teacher don't set the expectations with a concrete visual for what we're going to do during the day. And that's something that is the support the student needs in all of those environments. So we want to make sure we're documenting what works well for the student so that that carries over time and over environments. That example was in the general education classroom. It's about academic time. I still want to remind you we're talking about academic, non-academic, and extracurricular. So we want to be thinking about counseling services, athletics and recreational activities, transportation. We also want to think about referrals to agencies that provide assistance to people with disabilities to lead independent lives, and employment for students both by the educational agency and assistance in making outside employment available. Remember, the services are designed to meet the child's unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So when we're thinking about supplementary aids and services, we want to be thinking about all of those things as well. Now it's time to break down the pieces of our big topic today. We're talking about supplementary aids, and then we're going to talk about related services. The Michigan Department of Education defines 3 types of supplementary aids. Those are accommodations, modifications, and support to school personnel, families, or a liaison. As parents, I think we hear a lot about accommodations and modifications, and I don't feel like we hear a lot about support that can be provided for the adults to better support the student. So I think it's important that when we're thinking about types of supplementary aids, we're thinking about all 3 of these things. Accommodations are changes that help the student overcome the barriers presented by their disability. They're about leveling the playing field and making sure that the student has access to the academic, non-academic, and extracurricular environments. It allows the student to complete the same assignment or test or activity as the other students, but with a change to the timing or formatting, setting, scheduling, response, or presentation. Accommodations should be discussed by the IEP team and chosen to fit the child's individual needs. Talking to your child about what they think would be helpful is often a great first step to thinking about their needs and what adjustments might help eliminate those barriers. Accommodations can range from assistive technology for organization to alternative formats of written content like Braille or audio books. The student might need to take tests in a quiet area because they're easily distracted. They may need access to a visual timer to know how long they have to complete a task so they can plan accordingly. They might need assignments broken down into smaller steps where they get one step at a time where they're overwhelmed and don't know where to start when they get a big assignment. And getting it in pieces, the data has shown, allows them to be more successful. We do have a great list of sample accommodations on our website, and I do encourage you to search for accommodations on MichiganAllianceForFamilies.org to look at samples. There is no child on earth that needs every accommodation that's in those lists, and there is no list that includes every possible accommodation. But looking at those examples, especially with your child, can really help you think about what might meet their individual needs and can be a great jumping off point for talking with the rest of the IEP team. Modifications do change the expectations for learning. They are intended for students that need more support than an accommodation can provide. So where an accommodation levels the playing field, modifications change the playing field or the rules of the game. Where the expectation for learning or the requirement of a task is changed. We're changing that learning outcome. Michigan Department of Education has said that modifications are allowable for students with disabilities who are unable to access or demonstrate proficiency in the general education curriculum, although every effort must be made to provide students with an IEP full access to the general curriculum before making modifications. So that means trying accommodations and trying different methods before you're changing what the learning standards are. Because altering the learning standards, altering the curriculum standards, can affect a student's preparation for post-secondary success and the opportunity to earn a diploma. For students to receive a diploma, they have to meet standards of the Michigan Merit Curriculum, and it is standard all throughout the state. We just have that one curriculum all throughout Michigan. The district may decide that there are certain content standards that can't be modified or changed, because changing too much of the required content would mean the student isn't learning the required Michigan Merit Curriculum content. So when there are significant modifications to the student's curriculum, that is going to impact meeting the state high school graduation requirements. I do encourage you to hop on over to MichiganAllianceForFamilies.org and search for the webpage on Michigan Merit Curriculum to get more information on what that looks like and what the qualifications are for the diploma. There's also a great sample list on MichiganAllianceForFamilies.org from PACER of possible modifications and what they could look like. As with accommodations, there are lots and lots and lots of possible modifications, and it needs to be tailored to your own student's individual needs. The big takeaway is there is a big difference between these two, and when you're looking at supplementary aids, you should be able to define if it is an accommodation or a modification. With accommodations, students learn the same curriculum, but their individualized needs are accommodated. How the student learns is changed. With modifications, the curriculum itself is modified, and what the student learns is changed. The third type of supplementary aid is support to school personnel, families, or a liaison. And this extra service provides assistance, consultation, or training to the adults supporting the student, or stipulates a coordination of activities to address a specific need. This is not support to the student directly. This is what the adults need to better support the student. So when we're talking about assistance, it could be to better understand the educational need or disability of the child. It could be assistance in providing more information about child development or training opportunities or support groups, all sorts of different areas where assistance could be provided. Consultation could include consultation with teacher consultants within the school district or the intermediate school district about a specific need of the child, or it could be consultation with the liaison. It could be your private speech provider or your ABA provider consulting with the school staff or with school personnel, families, and the liaison. That there are definitely times where students' behavioral needs require a monthly staffing meeting to talk about what's working or what's not working. And that may need to include consultation from a behavior specialist and the ABA provider and the counselor, the family, the school staff. That type of monthly staffing meeting that is a need based on the student's disability would be documented in the IEP under supplementary aids and services, and that would be as support to school personnel, families, or a liaison. Training could be if your student requires a visual schedule and requires visual support and modifications to their assignments throughout the day, your paraeducator may need additional training to have expertise in how to provide those things throughout the day. You can talk about para-training in the IEP and what information they need to have or what training they need to have completed to specifically support your child. Training could be if your child has medical needs that need support, what those qualifications are for those adults to be able to support. So again, these are areas that are often confusing to families. I think we hear a lot about accommodations and modifications, and this piece about assistance, consultation, and training to the adults to support the child gets overlooked. So I think this is an important part to think about when you're thinking about what support your student needs. How can the adults best support them? Next, we're going to move on to related services, but before we leave supplementary aids, I just want to talk about a few questions to consider when you're working with your team to develop the supplementary aids section, and that is, what supplementary aids are currently being used? Do they work well? Are they already documented? When I was talking about some of those example accommodations that may be universal supports in the classroom, we want to make sure those are captured so that we know what has worked in the past and we can continue that in the future. What needs are documented in the present level that can be addressed by supplementary aids? Are there things that need accommodations or modifications? Are there things that need support of training for the adults to better support the student? What supports do you use at home and in the community? Are those already represented within your IEP? Are they in the program already so that what is successful at home and in the community is being used across the board? Will the accommodations and modifications help the child participate in the general education environment? That's the intention. That is what their function is for the child to participate in the general education environment. Who's going to teach the child how to use them? Do they have to ask for them? Are they always available? If it's technology, is there training coming for the adults? Is there training coming for the child? How will the child learn how to use those? And are they clearly documented to be done consistently? So if para-training on using visual supports is a need of the child and the staffing changes, how is that documented and how will it be done consistently even if the person changes? Related services means transportation or other developmental, corrective, or supportive services that a child needs to benefit from special education. Some children with disabilities need related services to help them meet their goals in their individualized education program. Some need related services to provide accommodations to have access. The list of related services is not limited to these. If the child needs the related service and the IEP team defines the related service as a need, then it must be provided, even if it's not on the list. The child's IEP team is who decides which related services are necessary based on the data that's collected, evaluation information, everything in that present level of academic achievement and functional performance. That PLAF information is going to drive what services the student needs. Qualified related service providers may also be members of the IEP team. And remember, as parents, we are members of the IEP team. We are important members of the IEP team. We are part of this team that decides what related services are needed for the student. So the team's going to discuss the child's needs and determine which related services are needed to provide a free and appropriate public education. If the team decides the service is needed by the student, the school district must provide the service. If there's a staffing issue or a shortage, the school district may have to contract with an outside provider to still provide the service. That once it is in the IEP and in the offer of FAPE, that is what the school is agreeing to provide for a free and appropriate public education. Related services may have goals in the IEP. A lot of students with occupational therapy or social work or speech services have specific goals related to what they're going to work on with that provider. And that may be one-on-one, that may be push in or pull out of the classroom. Those are all different ways to provide those services. There are also services that are accommodations, like transportation. That's not something that's going to have goals. We don't usually have goals around transportation, though depending on the individual student's needs, we could. So general transportation is available to all students, including special education students who qualify as determined by the local rules in your school district. If general transportation meets the student's needs, regardless of disability, it's not a related service in the IEP. If specialized transportation is needed with specialized equipment or specialized support to and from school, that is a related service, and it has to be provided to the special education student at no charge if it's identified in the IEP. So transportation is a service provided, but there are no goals related to it in most cases. It's just an accommodation to provide access to the school. I do encourage you to visit MichiganAllianceForFamilies.org. There is more information on all of these related services. I'm not going to dive too deep into any of them today because it's going to really vary based on your child, what you're most interested in. IDEA does require a projected date for the beginning of supplementary aids and services and the anticipated frequency, location, and duration of the services or accommodations and modifications. So diving into frequency, this includes consideration of how often and under what condition the supplementary aid or service is required. And that's specific to the needs identified in the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. So it needs to be based on the needs of your child. If you're ever in an IEP meeting where a district representative says, this is what we do, I would ask that follow-up of, I thought this plan needs to be individualized to the educational program of my child and their needs. It must be appropriate to the specific service and stated in the IEP in a manner that is clear to all who are involved in both the development and the implementation of the IEP. So we want to know in plain terms to everyone at the IEP team meeting, who is the development team, and the implementation, whoever's going to be providing that service, accommodation, or modification, so that whoever is picking up this plan knows what that looks like and when it is in place. That means that if you have a middle schooler, all of the teachers for every hour know what the accommodation or modification looks like and are able to implement it. That there is enough information in that frequency information of how often or under what condition that they know what that looks like. And anything that is in the individualized education program is the offer of a free and appropriate public education from your school district. It is not optional. If the 5th hour health teacher doesn't like the accommodation, that doesn't mean they don't do the accommodation. That is a requirement of what the student needs to have a free and appropriate public education. I also want to just talk a minute about writing daily or as needed or at teacher discretion upon student request without more information to quantify the frequency doesn't provide enough information to ensure that it's consistently implemented to make sure that the student need is met. So we want to really know what that looks like, and that does not provide enough information. So I would try to stay away from daily, as needed, at teacher discretion, upon student request. Those do not give a clear picture to implement what that frequency of condition looks like. The location of a supplementary aid or service describes where the service will be provided. If it's in general education, if it's in the occupational therapy room, it needs to be specific to the needs identified in the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. If it is written throughout the school setting, that implies that that supplementary aid or service will be provided during each class hour, lunch, recess, passing time, the entire full day. If it is written as general education and special education classroom settings, that is all of the learning academic time throughout the day. Those are two very different things. So all school settings there are appropriate supports that may be needed throughout all that time. And just in the academic classrooms, there are appropriate supports that may be needed during those times. But those are two different things and two different locations. So we want to make sure we're being clear on where aids and services will be provided. Duration refers to how long each session will last, like the number of minutes. And if there's only a window of time where the service will be provided, we want to know the starting date and the ending date. Just as an example, there could be a service of occupational therapy provided in the individualized education program that will be pull out to the occupational therapy room once a week for 20 to 30 minutes. And that tells us the frequency, the location, and the duration. So let's take all of that and apply it to the IEP process. We still are going to always start with our present level of academic achievement and functional performance. That's really looking at our students' needs, their strengths, what helps or hinders their learning. We want that objective data, how they're involved in the general education curriculum, extracurricular, and non-academic. From there, we can look at where the child is headed, what skill or behavior the child will learn. And those are our goals and objectives. If you haven't already watched that video on goals and objectives and progress monitoring, hop on over and take a look at that. Then we would need to layer in our supplementary aids and services. And those are the extra supports and services that are ensuring access to the general education curriculum in the least restrictive environment. And then we add in those related services. We need to define their frequency, their location, what the services are, and really be meeting all of the needs of the student. These all together, the team has determined a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. Great job. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad you tuned in, and now you know more about supplementary aids and services. Please do not hesitate to reach out to your regional parent mentor for more information and answers to your specific questions. Also, explore our website for more information on all of those related services and examples of accommodations and modifications. Don't hesitate to follow us on Facebook or Twitter and take a look at the YouTube channel at the other videos we offer there. We are here to support families. So as you have questions, if there is information you're looking for that you can't find related to special education, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are happy to answer your questions and here to support you. So I hope this information was helpful. Thank you for joining me and have a great day. Michigan Alliance for Families is an IDEA grant-funded initiative of the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education, and Michigan's Federal Parent Training and Information Center, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs.